Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to Channel Islands Live. Let me hear a big shout out hello from our students participating today in hello. All right, that was very loud. Well, we're live and interactive. I'm Ranger Dave. I'm a park ranger here at Channel Islands National Park. We call our program Channel Islands Live, and we just proved it. We can talk to you, you can talk to us, and we have two schools joining us today. We have Westridge Elementary in West Des Moines, Iowa, and we also have Selma Herndon Elementary in, I apologize, your city is? Okay, thank you. I know you're near Fresno. My bad. Anyway, welcome. And we also have people joining in today from on the internet. And I want to welcome all of you as well. You can't ask us questions today, but you can join in on the program passively. And I want to thank our tech partners at Ventura County Office of Education and also from Explore.org for making all of this possible. And this is no small feat. We are coming to you guys live, two different spots, one in center of California, one in Iowa, and then people all over the world watching. And we are 14 miles offshore on one of the islands that makes up California's Channel Islands. There are 8 islands here. I'm on Anacapa. It's one of 5 that make up Channel Islands National Park. But we are not here today to talk about Anacapa Island. We're here to talk about a book. Why am I on an island? Why did I come all the way across 14 miles of ocean on a boat, climb up to the top of this island and set up all this equipment to talk about a book? Because it's a book about an island. And so everybody shout out from both schools. What book am I holding in my hand? All right. Island of the Blue Dolphins. And this is a book about an island. It's a book about one of the islands, in particular about, it's a story of a woman who lived on one of these 8 Channel Islands. And that island is not here. It's actually now a Navy base, and it's quite far offshore. In fact, my cameraman Josh, why don't we pan out a little bit, and we're going to show you where this island is. It's called San Nicolas Island. And it is about 40 miles south of where we are right now. And because we can't bring you this program, and that's it, Josh, so if you look straight out on the horizon, you actually can't see it today. It's too far away. So we're just showing you open ocean. But that's for a reason, to give you a little bit of a feel of what it's like to be out on a Channel Island when you can't see other land and how you feel isolated and sometimes alone. And in fact, the next major chunk of land, once you pass the Channel Islands to the direction Josh is pointing at right now, well, let me ask you. Let's start with Selma Herndon. Do any of your students or just one of your students want to make a guess as to what is the next landmass when you go past where the camera's looking south of the Channel Islands? Think of what's south of California. I hear answers. Mrs. New, do you? And Mrs. New, can you help clear that up? I can't quite hear what the kids are shouting out.
They said the country of Mexico is south of California.
It is. Mexico is south of California, and that's a great guess. But it's not the next landmass south of Anacapa. So let's see if our school in Des Moines at Westridge, if any of the students there know, what is the next major landmass south of Anacapa Island? Mexico is south of us, but it's off to the east as well.
Say it. Say it loud right there.
Hawaii. Hawaii's south of us. That's an island I'd almost rather be at than Anacapa today. I think you understand why. And it's southwest of us, and Hawaii is a tiny speck in a giant ocean. even though when you're there it seems big. Nope, the next land south of Anacapa, because the coast of California goes from north-south to east-west here, we're south of the coast ourselves, is Antarctica, where the South Pole is and the penguins. So there's a lot of ocean out there, and San Nicolas Island, where this book takes place, is the last island in the chain before you go south all the way to Antarctica. So it's out there. It's not that far. It's 40 miles from here. But we're going to talk about this book. And do you guys think this book, in both classes, you can yell this out as group answer, is this book a true story or is it fiction? Okay, perfect. You're all right. I heard true and fiction, and we call this historical fiction. It's a story written about something that actually happened, about a true story, but the details in the book, many of which are unknown, because this is the book about the lone woman. In the book, her name is Karana. And the actual lone woman, we don't know what her name was, but it wasn't Karana, so what she did day to day, we don't really know. We know what she would have had to do to survive, but nobody was there with her. She was the lone woman. So there are details in the book that are fiction, but historical fiction, so based on a true story, but not all of the details in it are true. However, they do represent what life is like, what life was like for the Native Americans who lived not only on San Nicolas Island, but also on all of the Channel Islands, lived on or used them. And so today we're going to explore a little bit about how Karana met her needs in order to be able to survive. We all have very similar needs to survive, and I'm going to see if you can give me some ideas as to what those things are. Yet how we meet those needs is very different today in many ways, and maybe not so different in others, but we'll make a comparison of what things Karana did in order to survive, how we meet those same needs, and maybe how some of the other Native Americans on the mainland also met those needs back in Karana's time. So I have, and Josh, why don't we pan down here for a second, a basket that is similar to the kind of basket that the people who lived on the islands may have used. And in this basket, I have a number of props and items, and we're also going to use some of our natural surroundings to highlight the answers to the questions or to the guesses that you have. And we'll talk a little bit about how Karana survived. So let's start with Livingston. And does one of your students have a guess as to one of the things that the lone woman or Karana needed in order to survive out there by herself for all those years on San Nicolas Island? Weapons. Right. We know that she needed to protect herself. Who would she need to protect herself from if she was alone?
The wild dog.
The wild dogs, yeah. And also, she wasn't alone her whole life. Before she was alone, the Russians and Aleuts who came in to hunt the otters were a threat, and of course that was why she ended up alone. So I have something, and I'm just going to bend down here for a second and grab it, that could be used for many things. This is a dolphin rib bone, and so this certainly could be used as a weapon, like a club. And so this is just one of many things she could use. So protection, being safe, is an important thing. What do we use for protection? Let's go to Westridge. Do one of you have an example of what we use today to protect ourselves?
Say it loudly.
Guns.
Guns sometimes.
Guns and knives.
Guns and knives. I use the police because I'm not an expert with guns and knives, but there are various means. Karana's time on the islands, the Native Americans didn't have guns. They did make knives using rock tools. They could make a certain type of rock cut into a very sharp blade that they could make a knife and an arrowhead out of. There's also something else that they used to make pointy objects for harpoon ends and arrowheads. Does anyone know what that is? We'll go back to Livingston, if you've gotten that far in the book yet. Yeah, sea elephant teeth, yeah. They called them sea elephants. We call them northern elephant seals. I stumbled a little bit on that one. So the name changed a little bit as far as how they're referred to from back when Scott Odell wrote the book. But yeah, the tooth is a very sharp thing. And so they would use, and Karana would use, the things that were available to her. And we do the same thing today. So for me, the police, I live in a city, that's my protection. They're available to me. So it's all how we adapt to the environment we're living in. We'll go back to Iowa now. We'll let you guess, take a guess as to what would be another need besides protection.
Oh, stay off.
Shelter.
Shelter. Okay. Shelter's a good one. Today on Anacapa, it's a beautiful day. It's nice and balmy, a little bit warm. We don't need a lot of shelter, but it's very windy here a lot. It's very foggy. And those circumstances would have been the same. They're the same on all of these Channel Islands. And so in the wintertime, it doesn't snow here, but it gets cold. And so shelter is an important thing, also to protect her from those wild dogs. And so again, I'll actually show the same prop because this is a dolphin rib bone, but sometimes whales wash ashore here. And so a whale rib bone is much larger. And what do you think you would use a whale rib bone for in conjunction with building a shelter or a house? Does anybody know? And we'll stick with we'll go to Livingston on this question.
Jacob?
Fence.
Did you say fence?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she built a fence to protect herself from the wild dogs. So big bones could be set up like a picket fence. Also the frames for the hut she built, and then she would thatch it with grasses that are found on the island, and some grasses are even found in the water offshore. And so this is a means of building a shelter. We all need that. We live in houses and trailers, and we go camping and live in tents. And so we build our own structures using the resources we have. So things have changed a little bit there. On the mainland, during Karana's time, do you think most of the Native Americans used whale rib bones as their frames for their houses? No. There aren't that many whales washing up ashore, and it's a pretty messy job to get the rib bones. And so on the mainland, there are a lot of trees. And Josh, let's pan maybe just a little bit on the top of the island here. You can see there are no trees on Anacapa Island. It's pretty dry here. There are no water sources. We don't get a lot of rain. San Nicolas Island has some springs, a little bit of surface water, but not very much either. And so there are a few trees there, but not many. So using long tree branches as the frame of your house wouldn't work very well on the island, but it does work better than whale rib bones on the mainland. So even then, people living in different areas would adapt to the resources that they had in the place where they lived. Okay, let's go. Let's have Livingston take the next stab at guessing as to one of her needs. So we have shelter and protection so far.
Natural food and water?
Food and water, of course. Yeah, food and water are very important. So how did Karana meet? I mentioned there are some springs on San Nicolas Island, so that's how she would have gotten her water. But what would she have eaten? There aren't a lot of animals out there, and I think in the book it describes it very well. How did Karana meet her food needs?
Michelle?
I'm sorry, I didn't call out of school. Let's go to Westridge.
All right, we have a student coming up, Ranger Dave. Hang on one second.
Okay. And I'm getting hungry thinking about what Karana had. It's almost lunchtime.
Didn't they have food left over in the canoes that she used?
And Mr.
He
Bach,
said food that was left over in news.
I still didn't hear that. It broke up a little. Food that...
Food that was left over in the canoes.
Oh, Yeah, food. So if there was food left over in the canoe, she would eat that first, but that would be used up pretty quick. So on these islands, Anacapa is as an example, there's only one type of land mammal on this island. It's a kind of a mouse called the Anacapa deer mouse, about this big. And in the entire world, it only lives on Anacapa. It's a special mouse because of that. San Nicolas also has mice, but there's not a lot of land animals to eat. Yet the ocean around us, and Josh, why don't we pan down and we'll take a look at an animal that's plentiful right now in the waters right near us. The oceans around us are full of life, and so Karana went fishing, and she used the spear tip that we talked about, and also made fishing hooks out of shells, and so she could fish and gather food out of the ocean or out of the tide pools at low tide. And I think now you're probably getting a good view of some larger animals that are very common around the island. Does anybody know what we're looking at? Everybody just shouted out from both schools. Yeah, these are actually sea lions. They're one of about 5 or 6 species of these types of animals called pinnipeds that are found around all the Channel Islands. And at San Nicolas Island, there are a lot of them. And those elephant seals that he called sea elephants in the book, there are thousands of them out there as well. And so marine mammals could have been a food source, but what else would they have provided Karana? And this is really the whole reason that the Russians came to the island and why Karana ended up alone. So what do you think it was out there that she was able to get from the sea otters? And let's go to Livingston for this one.
Okay. Angel Maxima. Okay, go ahead, Christian. Abalone. Louder.
Abalone, yeah. Okay, so abalone was a food source and also something she could use for a tool. And actually, Josh, we can bring the camera back up. And I have an abalone shell that I will show you. And I would guess that some of you have seen abalone shells and some of you haven't, but they're very important to Karana, and they were important to all the people on the islands. And so this is an abalone shell. And an abalone is actually a marine or an ocean snail. And so inside here is where the snail lives, and this is its shell. So she could eat the snail. She could use the shell to break it up to make fish hooks or jewelry. And this could also be used as a bowl to eat or drink out of. It could be used as a scooping tool for digging. And so this would have been a really prized possession and something that was very common in her time. And so this is something that Karana would have used. Now the otters, and I don't have a real otter to hold up, of course, but this is a stuffed otter. It's cute, and it is an example, though, of otter fur, which is what the Russians were there hunting, and how lush and thick it is. Otters actually have the thickest fur of any mammal on the planet, and so the pelts were very prized, and they were used for, and let's go to Westridge, what would you use an otter pelt for back in those days?
We have a student coming up.
Okay.
Clothes.
Say it again, please.
Clothes.
Clothes. Yeah, so this was something that Karana could have made clothes out of. Her people did, and they were so valuable that that's why outsiders came to hunt them and then ended up getting into warfare with Karana's people, which caused them to, the remainder of the people who survived, to eventually leave the island. And of course, Karana was left behind. So otters were something that helped her, but also harmed her in many ways, not on purpose, but through circumstances. So clothing is also a type of shelter. It's the shelter you wear. So a house protects you from the outside, but we wear shirts and jackets and hats. This hat's protecting my face from the sun. And so making a coat out of an otter pelt would be something that would have helped Karana. What else did she use? What other resources did Karana have to make clothing out of? There's one thing in particular that she made a dress out of. And we'll go to Livingston for this one.
A skirt.
Her skirt, yeah. So she made a skirt out of cormorant feathers, and cormorants are a type of seabird, and the Channel Islands are actually the place where almost all the seabirds in Southern California come from. Because there aren't a lot of predators here, the seabirds can nest safely. There are also a lot of cliffs. You saw the cliffs when Josh panned down to the sea lions, and they can make their nests on the cliffs and in the little caves there. And so because of that, there are thousands and thousands of birds out here. And this isn't a great, this is a pelican. It's got a little bit of a bent neck from being in the basket. But this is the largest breeding site for California brown pelicans on the west coast of the United States. Many breed south of here in Mexico. But without the Channel Islands and that protection, you wouldn't see these birds. And the cormorants were birds that are very plentiful at San Nicolas Island, and Karana was able to use those resources as well. We go to the store and buy clothes, or we will sometimes, if you're lucky or talented, you could make your own clothes, or your parents can do that. Karana used otters and seabirds. What do you think the Native Americans used on the mainland where they were inland, let's say, and there weren't as many? Well, there weren't otters, certainly, and the seabirds might fly a little bit inland, but not too far. So we'll go to Westridge for this one. What would they use? How would they provide for their clothes?
Come on. How would the people on the mainland provide for their clothes? What would they use? Say it loud, didn't they?
Buffalo.
Buffalo, certainly in your part of the country, yeah, that was the main source. Food, clothing, all kinds of stuff. And here locally, we didn't have bison, but we did have deer and still do. So deer skins would have been very popular. And that brings in another aspect of this, boats. We came on a boat to get here today. It was the only way to get here. And Karana, her people had to use a boat to leave the island. The Russians used a boat different than this. This was a descriptive model of what the Native Americans' boats look like here, their canoes. But boats would have been important, and Karana did have a boat there. And what did she use the boat for? Let's go to Livingston. Why would she need a boat if she was alone on the island? To go fishing, yeah. And at one point, she decided she didn't like being alone. She tried to escape the island on her boat, but the ocean wasn't calm like today. It was rough, and she eventually went back because she feared for her life if she were to try to make that crossing in a canoe. When Karana's people were there, before she was alone, they used these boats not only for fishing, but to trade items between the different islands and the mainland. So if you lived inland, you don't have any abalone, and you might want to have an abalone shell for all the uses we talked about, but you do have deer skins, and the people on the island don't have deer skins, but they have a lot of abalone. So there was a lot of trade that went on back and forth, and this was their means to do that. So some things are multi-purpose. This is not a real egg, but a replica seabird egg. All those birds produce a lot of eggs. That's another food source. And so you can see that while Karana was alone on the island for many years, almost 18 years, she was able to provide for most of her needs. But can anyone think of another need that would be very hard to provide for if you were alone on an island? So we'll go to Livingston for this one. You have food, shelter, water, clothes, weapons. What's missing?
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And that's a little garbled, so you have to repeat it, please. Friendship, did you say?
Friendship. Yeah.
Friendship, that's what I thought I heard. And so friendship, you know, that was the toughest question of the day. I think, was that Emily who answered that? That was, okay, well, that was a great answer because friendship is not something we always would think of. We're thinking about, what do we need? We need to eat, we need to drink water, we need to be safe. But people are social animals. Most people like to be around other people. And so imagine yourselves on this island as Karana was, and we showed you earlier all the open ocean around here, and how out there especially there are days you can't see any other land. The next major landmass to the south is Antarctica, thousands of miles away, and you're all alone. And imagine yourselves in that situation. And so there's that need for socialization and friendship. And Karana found a way around that. Actually, there were a couple things she did. And so let's go back to Iowa, to Westridge. What do you think it was? Are you far enough in the book to know what did Karana do to fill that need?
Somebody who has read the book. Read the book? Come on up. All right, we have a student walking up, Ranger Dave.
Okay.
Or just tell me the answer. Her dog.
Her
was
dog,
her social companion.
Right. We talked about wild dogs being a threat, but she actually befriended one of the dogs, too, actually, the dog, and then the dog's son, I guess, or pup. And also there was a woman who came ashore from one of the Russian boats who she was secretly friends with for a short while she was there. So she did seek out friendship. And eventually she was able to solve how not to be alone on the island, or fate helped solve that for her. I'm actually not going to go there. I know not all of you have finished the book yet, so I'm going to leave that as an open-ended part of the story. But I'm going to zoom fast forward to modern age, to just a couple of years ago. And since this book is historical fiction, and I mentioned it's based on a true story that happened on a real island just south of here, we know that. And how do we know that? Because there are accounts of it. There are written history, oral history from people who were involved when she came ashore. There are newspaper articles about the woman and about what happened when her people left the island. And so it's something that we know happened, and researchers, archaeologists and scientists and even volunteers helping have been on San Nicolas Island and worked with the Navy there and with colleges and other institutions to see if they can find out actual clues to how the people on the island lived through the things that were left behind. And there are tools, there are shells left behind, there have been pieces of things that have been found on the island that help document what really happened. And just a couple of years ago, something very exciting happened. Karana, in addition to living in a hut, in a house for much of her time, took shelter in a cave on the island. And that cave was just recently found. And so now excavations are occurring to learn more about how Karana lived, the real lone woman, by seeing what is left as they dig down through the dirt levels that have accumulated over the years in that cave. And in addition, there were a couple boxes, wooden boxes found that had all kinds of artifacts, jewelry, tools, spear tips, and they have been dated to right around the time when the lone woman was on the island. And so it is very likely, not 100% known for sure, just like some of the details in the book, but very likely that those may be the very items that we just gave descriptions of, the things Karana herself, or the lone woman, the real lone woman, used in order to meet her needs so she could survive on the island and be able to sustain herself. And so today, we've given you a little bit of a window into what it looks like out here on the Channel Islands, and to what people back then in general on the mainland and the islands needed to do to survive, how Karana survived, and also how we provide for those same needs today. And so times change, but our needs don't. And we do have, thankfully, through books like this, through the historic record, and through the work being done by the researchers on San Nicolas Island. Similar work is being done here by the National Park Service to learn about the history of the people who lived on the other islands. And all of this is being preserved by being protected naturally by the isolation of the islands, but also on these islands by the National Park Service, by the Navy on San Nicolas Island. And so we can hopefully learn from that, learn how she survived, and retain that knowledge through the protection given by these agencies, and not just for us now today, but so that your kids and their kids and their kids can also learn about life on the Channel Islands back before the Europeans settled here. So for us, for future generations, we hope to have this. And thank you very much. You guys have had great answers, and it's been a great interaction. And we'll say goodbye from Anacapa Island in Channel Islands National Park. Thank you, guys.
Fifth graders for joining us. Do you remember parts of the book?